Joe Rogan is the perfect person to teach us about consultative selling. Join me for that and so much more on this episode of The Inside BS Show. Hey now, my name is Dave Lorenzo. This is The Inside BS Show, and today, Joe Rogan is going to teach us about consultative selling. That's right. For those of you who are not familiar, Joe Rogan is America's #1 podcast host. He just got a $100 million deal from Spotify to be the exclusive distributor of the Joe Rogan Experience, which is his podcast show. And the other day, I'm standing on the sidelines of the soccer field while my daughter is playing in a soccer game. And a gentleman walks up to me, let's call him Flat Earth Phil, because Flat Earth Phil's always got a conspiracy theory at the ready. And Phil says to me, hey Dave, your boy, Joe Rogan, he's taking ivermectin, and it cured him of his COVID. See, I told you, we don't need the vaccine. Joe Rogan did get COVID, and he took a number of different treatments, some conventional treatments and some treatments that have been debunked by science. And my buddy, Flat Earth Phil, said to me that Joe Rogan was doing it, so I should do it too. Why does this make Joe Rogan an authority on consultative selling? Well, this is what gave me the idea, because I thought to myself, oh my goodness, Joe Rogan has become so pervasive in our society that he's even influencing Flat Earth Phil. What does it mean to be great at consultative selling? And what does that have to do with Joe Rogan? Well, I'm going to tell you. There's 5 things that Joe Rogan has that make him great at consultative selling, and he's not even trying to be a consultative salesperson like you and me. So the first thing that Joe Rogan has, first quality that Joe Rogan has, hey, what am I going to do? I call it things. You got this, you got that, you got a thing. I got a thing over here. Anyway, I digress. The first quality that Joe Rogan has that makes him great at consultative selling is that he's intellectually curious. His shows are 3 hours long, and you know why they're 3 hours long? Because he asks every question of his guests. When he gets a guest in his studio, he sits them down and he makes them comfortable. He gives them drinks. He lets them smoke cigars. He lets them smoke weed. He lets them relax. And then he starts to ask them about their life. He starts to ask them questions that make them feel good about themselves. And then he digs into the things he really wants to know about. Joe was once interviewed about the guests he has on his show, because he doesn't have guests on his show who are promoting a book. He doesn't have guests on his show who have a big movie coming out. He picks his guests based on who he wants to talk to, because he's curious about them. So he has people on from the world of mixed martial arts. He has people on who talk about hunting because he's into hunting. He has people on who talk about health and fitness. He has people on who talk about UFOs. He has people on who talk about science. Has people on who talk about the military. He has people on for every topic. He's an intellectually curious person. You are in sales. When you sit down to talk to a prospect, you should be asking them about their life, what got them to the place they are now in work, at their job, why they do what they do. Do they enjoy what they do? What's next for them? What are their goals? What are their ambitions? What are they worried about? What keeps them up at night? Be intellectually curious. That's what Joe Rogan is, and that's the first step in consultative selling. The second step in consultative selling that Joe Rogan does really well is you got to build a network of people who know you, like you, and trust you. Joe Rogan got $100 million from Spotify to move his show exclusively to their service for distribution of his podcast. Also, the full-length video of his show is only available on Spotify. He was able to do this because he has an entire community of people who know him, like him, and trust him. They're called listeners. On video, they're called viewers. Hopefully, you're part of my community of people who know me, like me, and trust me. That's essential to consultative selling. Why? Because when you are a consultative salesperson, you're solving problems in exchange for money. And people have to feel comfortable sharing their problems with you. They also have to feel comfortable asking you questions. And that happens with Joe all the time. Joe is able to command huge advertising fees on a podcast because he's able to recommend products and services that solve people's problems. There are products or services, different types of health and fitness products that Joe uses that he talks about on the show just because he's talking about it, that sell out in stores, and some of them aren't even sponsors. Why? Because those people know and they like and they trust them. So you, as a consultative salesperson, need to build a community of people who know you, like you, and trust you. And when you build that community of people, they will then follow your guidance. If they tell you they have a problem and you mention a solution or you offer to help them solve that problem, they will accept your solution as gospel. The third thing Joe Rogan does is he uses consultative sales skills to get people to open up. What do I mean by that? He uses empathy. He makes people feel really great before he asks them the tough questions. If somebody's struggling with something, he'll look at them and he'll say, I understand how you feel. I had a similar situation happen to me. Shares a quick story with them, and then they feel like he gets what they're talking about. He also does what is called active listening. He'll ask a question, and then when they answer the question, he'll go, that's really interesting. So what you're saying is, and he'll repeat the last thing they said back to them. Or sometimes he'll paraphrase what they said. He'll say, okay, that's interesting. So you're saying this, this, and this, and it's a little different from the way they said it, but it draws out in them a little bit more information every time. These skills, empathy and active listening, are skills that a consultative salesperson uses to get his prospects or her prospects to open up, to share great information so that you can offer solutions to the problems they have. The fourth thing that Joe Rogan does really well, that Joe Rogan has known his entire career, is being famous is not nice, it's a necessity. Joe started off as a stand-up comedian in Boston, and then he was the host of Fear Factor. He went on the road, he eventually went out to LA, and he was great as a stand-up comedian, very well respected, still does stand-up to this day. He does stand-up shows every month. You can see him all over the country. Joe then got a gig as the host of a show called Fear Factor. And as the host of Fear Factor, he became revered by the people who worked on the show because legend has it, and this is a story that can be verified, he gave up a portion of his pay so that he could have the exact crew he wanted to work with him on the show. He then went from Fear Factor into doing the podcast, expanding his stand-up, and he got a cast role on a show called News Radio. The star of the show was a gentleman from Saturday Night Live, who's famous on Saturday Night Live, named Phil Hartman. He became the star of News Radio, and Joe had a cast role, a very big role on that show, with Phil Hartman raised his profile even further. Then he started doing his podcast, and he also did some commentary on mixed martial arts fights. That led to him getting a very high-paying gig as a color commentator in the field of mixed martial arts, and now he does stand-up. He does his podcast, and he's a mixed martial arts commentator. What does this mean for you in consultative sales, as a consultative selling professional? Well, Joe, in each of his niche markets, became famous in them, and that fame offered him more opportunity. Doing stand-up comedy, he would do 3, 4, 5 shows a night in Boston, and then he would go on the road and do shows. Then he would do 3 or 4 shows a night in LA. That got him discovered, and he got on Fear Factor, and he was still doing 3 or 4 shows a night in stand-up comedy, becoming more and more famous. Then he got the gig on News Radio, and he was still doing stand-up comedy, becoming more and more famous. Got the podcast, kept doing stand-up comedy, becoming more and more famous. Got MMA, continued to do MMA, doing the podcast, doing stand-up comedy, working really hard on keeping his fame in each of those niche markets. So you, as a consultative selling professional, if you sell aircraft parts and they're bought by aircraft manufacturers, you need to be the most famous aircraft parts expert in the aircraft industry, in the aviation industry. I help people in B2B sales shorten the sales cycle and deepen client relationships. I increase client lifetime value. So I do these videos to help B2B people realize that deepening relationships, increasing client lifetime value is better than cold calling. I'm trying to become famous on YouTube, and if 20 people watch this video, I'll be famous to 20 people. If 200 people watch this video, I'll be famous to 200 people. My YouTube channel has over 2 million views. Now, maybe that was 1 million people watching 2 videos, but to those 1 million people, I touch their lives in some way. That's what I'm talking about. Leverage your expertise in your niche market. Become famous in your niche market as an expert. That's the 4th key to consultative selling, and Joe Rogan taught us that. The 5th key to consultative selling is be a person of interest. People are enormously curious about Joe Rogan, and take us back to where we started. I told you that he got COVID-19 in September, the end of August, the beginning of September 2021. And when he got COVID-19, he put up a post on Instagram. And the post on Instagram was, hey, I got COVID-19. He told the story of how he thinks he got it. And then he said, hey, we're throwing the kitchen sink at it. I'm doing this. I got monoclonal antibodies. I'm taking a vitamin drip. And I'm taking ivermectin. And I took a Z-Pack. Some of the things he mentioned weren't approved treatments. That made him more interesting to people than he already was. He's getting $100 million for his podcast, and now because of his COVID-19 treatments, he's even more interesting. How could that be? Well, here's the bottom line. He knows what to say and what to do to get people even more interested in him. When you become and he's into health and fitness, he's into hunting, he's into MMA, he knows a little bit about a lot of things. He's an interesting person and people are interested in him. You've got to be the same way. So start with an external orientation, become famous, build a community of people who know you, like you, and trust you. Use your consultative selling skills of empathy, have an external orientation, and be a person of interest. That's how you become great at consultative selling, and that's what Joe Rogan has taught us today. If you want more great videos about consultative selling or other topics to help you deepen client relationships, grow lifetime value, and shorten the sales cycle, right below me right now, there's another video filling in. That next video is all about being the best in B2B sales. Click on that video right now. I'll see you there.